Good afternoon friends, welcome back to my channel. Trying a new setup today. We have a different background. Welcome to the bed, welcome to the teddies. Today I just felt really inspired to randomly film a video. I was not planning on doing this today and I have about 50 minutes until I'm doing an online journaling thing. But I really wanted to talk about this, so as you can tell by the title, today we are talking about why I love being autistic. I feel like some people might find that problematic, but what I'm not trying to do here is invalidate the struggles that we autistic people experience. I'm trying to celebrate myself and reclaim the things that I love for myself about the autistic experience, because I feel like we can accept and validate and acknowledge and process and feel all the things that are difficult about being autistic, whilst also loving the things that we get to experience in this life because of being autistic at the same time. And I think it's important to do that. So I've got a little list on my phone, so if I'm looking down, that's why. And we're just gonna jump straight into it. I didn't write this list in any particular order, but just in the order that things popped into my mind. And the first thing that popped into my mind when I thought about why I love being autistic is there's this part of me, I do think it's related to my autistic self, that is so gentle and so sweet and innocent. Not innocent as in like unwise or inexperienced or any of those types of things, because there's so much about my life that has taught me a lot for the age that I am, if that makes sense. But there's this part of my personality, there's this part of my being that is so, it's hard to describe, but it's like divinely kind and gentle and innocent in a way that I feel like human beings were always meant to be. And I really love that about myself. I really love that I'm so connected to that in my being. I really love that there's a lot of how I operate in life that comes out of that place. Let me know, I'd be really interested to know if any other autistic folks are watching this and who also feel like they have that kind of quality. It's not something that I hear people speak about really, it's just something that I feel like is an intrinsic part of me and that I feel like is linked to being autistic. Number 2 is special interests. So I honestly don't know how to explain to a neurotypical person what it is like to experience a special interest, but I'm going to try. Basically, a special interest is like, I don't want to use the word obsessive because I feel like that is almost derogatory, but a special interest is something that you kind of delve into, that you can get so much joy and so much enthusiasm from, but also at the same time experience the regulation of your nervous system while participating in this thing, because it's something that you love so much. For me, one of those things is books and reading, and that's why I make videos about that topic. But there's a level of joy and a level of comfort that autistic folks can experience from a special interest that is not like any other kind of joy or comfort. It's hard to explain, but it's a wonderful experience. Number 3 is being detail orientated. So I notice tiny things. I notice small patterns in stuff, and I really feel like this ties in with how creative of a being I am. Like, I notice things in fonts, I notice things in colours, I notice things in music. And when I say I notice things, I mean like I notice similarities and differences and patterns. It's kind of like when it comes to anything creative, my brain can like zoom in and take in all this information about the creativity of something, whether that is like a visual thing or a musical thing, and notice the patterns and the differences and the way certain techniques are used and how they've created this thing to make it look like this. And my brain can notice that level of detail, and that is so tied to me being an autistic human being. And not only is that so useful to me as a creative person, but it's also so much fun to be able to do that. It's almost like, it reminds me of, if you've ever watched the BBC adaptation of Sherlock, the series, where the way that Sherlock's brain process is depicted, that's how I relate to creativity and noticing creative things and being able to pick up on these tiny little bits and pieces. That's what being detail oriented feels like to me as an autistic person who is intensely creative. Oh, number 4, I wrote sensory euphoria. And I don't often hear people describe it as sensory euphoria, but what I mean by this is when I hear a piece of music and it's so incredibly satisfying to my nervous system and brain that it becomes a visceral experience to hear that. I also experience that with stimming. If I'm doing a particularly satisfying stim, like right now I'm flapping my hands, but if I'm doing a particularly satisfying stim and I know that my body really needs that in that moment, it can feel so intensely satisfying that it's visceral, like with the listening to the really satisfying music. Also, I experience that sometimes in nature, where, say for example, I'm like walking through a woods or a forest or something and I'm literally surrounded by nature. There is a total sensory euphoria that comes with just feeling completely absorbed in nature and just being immersed in the colours, the sounds, feeling like I'm disconnected from humans, feeling like I'm disconnected from brick buildings and stuff like that. There is such a, yeah, like a visceral body relief and joy that I can experience. And I feel so grateful for being able to experience that. Like, I can't imagine moving through life not being able to have the experience of like just feeling complete euphoria and elation from listening to a beautiful piece of music or being in the ocean or whatever it might be, whatever sensory experience. It's such a beautiful thing. Number 5, I've just written fun alone time. I get so much joy as an autistic person from being by myself, pottering around, just doing my little bits and bobs, participating in my special interests. I feel like as a person who has been high masking for most of their life, I have become really used to masking around others on a level that I'm really not even aware of. And so then obviously when I'm on my own, I naturally don't do that. So I do just really get to experience my natural way of being and my natural level of enjoying the things that I'm enjoying. I'm so happy making this video. So yeah, I really experience a lot of joy being on my own and just doing my little creative projects and stuff. And I love that about being autistic because like I get to have quite a special relationship with my own self. And I feel like there's probably a lot of people in the world who don't know themselves that well or who are scared to experience that level of intimacy with their own selves or just don't get to because they have wives or husbands or children or families, or they don't have the privilege to be on their own very much or whatever it may be. And it makes me feel really grateful that I get to experience just the joy of being really comfortable with myself. Alone time is fucking fun, man. Don't get me wrong, like I love spending time with the people that I love, but it is definitely a challenge for me to be my absolute full, unmasked, not even thinking about being perceived self when I'm around anyone. So when I'm by myself, I can be in my own little world. Number 6 is connection with animals. It's hard to even explain how connected to animals I feel, especially cats and dogs. I mean, that's probably just because I used to be a professional pet sitter, but there's this level of connection that I feel to cats and dogs, especially dogs, where I just feel like I'm communicating with them and I just have immediate understandings sometimes of what they're trying to say to me or of what they need in a specific moment, or of what they're asking for, or of what they mean by a specific behaviour. It's weird, but I just feel like that's my natural way of being with them. There's some weird level of communication that is so hard to explain, but just feels like a beautiful thing. And I know that it's accurate because they do something and I'm like, oh, they want food, or oh, they want whatever it is. They want to be picked up right now, or they want to go out, or whatever it is, and then I do that thing and it's obvious that that was what they were asking for. But anyway, I just love animals so much, and yeah, I feel like it's such a privilege to be able to have that connection to animals. Sometimes I feel like it's a lot easier to communicate with an animal than it is with a human. And I think that's probably quite a universal autistic experience. Next we have number 7, and that is autistic joy. When I think about autistic joy, it's like I was saying earlier about the sensory euphoria, it is like a level of euphoria that I feel like is somehow different from the way that neurotypical people experience joy, and I've no idea how, and it's hard to explain, but it's almost like all-encompassing. There's so much joy that it just takes over, and that's such an amazing thing to experience. It kind of reminds me actually of gender euphoria, where you just feel this intense, visceral, all-encompassing joy for feeling like so much of yourself when you experience gender euphoria. And I feel like it's kind of like that with autistic joy, where there's no point where autism ends and you begin, because autism is such an intrinsic part of yourself and who you are and how you experience things, that when you have those intense feelings like joy, the fact that you're autistic just makes it a specifically intense experience in such a beautiful way. Hard to explain, but awesome. Okay, number 8, I've written being determined, comma, seeing things plainly. So what I mean is it's kind of related to the whole black and white thinking thing that you hear quite often when people talk about autism, but for me it's a bit more nuanced than black and white thinking. But when I say being determined and seeing things plainly, let me give you an example. So like, I've always been interested in personal development, I've always been interested in psychology, spirituality, trying to create the happiest life possible for myself, trying to live a life that means that I'm thriving as much as I can possibly be. And that has led me to learn so much about myself, to learn so much about my internal processes, my patterns of behaviour that don't serve me, my limiting beliefs, all of that type of stuff. And so I have always been the type of person to, when I realise something about myself, when I realise that I need to do something differently, when I realise that I need to think about something differently or have a different kind of attitude or mindset towards something, when I realise that I need to change something about my life, obviously all of that is with a view to bettering myself and bettering my situation and bettering my life for myself. And when I realise any of that stuff, it's very plain to me, it's very like straightforward. Well, obviously I need to change that thing. Well, obviously I'm not going to do it like that. I'm going to do it differently next time. Well, obviously I'm going to stop doing that. Well, obviously, whatever it might be. Ex-partners and parents have told me multiple times before that I'm like one of those people where once I decide that I'm going to do something, I really am going to do it because I've decided. It's kind of like that, plain and simple in my mind. Obviously not everything is that easy, and obviously there are things that are more difficult to change and blah 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 blah. But yeah, I can be very like that about things, and it really serves me sometimes. I have ended up getting really practiced at being able to let go of old parts of myself. I've been able to get really practiced of changing my mindsets about things, changing my limiting beliefs about things, and obviously that has caused a lot of growth throughout my life. So that is great. Let's move on to number 9. Number 9 is how it's made me learn so much about myself and other people. So being autistic has kind of been such a huge journey of learning, of grieving, of self-acceptance, of self-affirmation, of reclamation. And that has meant that I've had to address a lot of things about who I am, how I experience the world, how other people experience me, how I want to live in the world, who I am in the world in relation to other people. And that has meant that I have been forced to learn so much about myself, about my needs, about my limitations, about how I need to live, about what my day-to-day needs to look like in order to be sustainable to me. And obviously you could see that as a negative thing, because there's a lot of people in the world who don't have to go through that process, who don't have to address all of that stuff, who kind of have the privilege to not have to think about it, because the way that they operate in the world already, the way that they've been taught to operate in the world by society, actually does fit them and suit them. But the way that I see it, I think that as a 30-year-old discovering that I'm autistic when I was 27, this whole process of the last 3 years has given me the opportunity to live the whole of the rest of my life, hopefully that will be a very long time, in a way that is the most beneficial to me, in a way that means that I will have the most joyful, the most full of life possible. And that's an opportunity that I'm so grateful to have had. I feel like being autistic has let me realise so many things and change so many things about the way that I think about my future, to where I know that I will live a happier life and I know that I will thrive throughout my life a lot more since I've had the opportunity to address being autistic and accept it, and yeah, think about what that means for me for the rest of my life in order for me to be a happy being. It's also made me understand a lot about psychological things, like the psychological reasons that I do certain things versus what other people are doing psychologically. And I feel like it's ended up giving me, because I've gotten so used to trying to understand myself in the context of the rest of the world, it's given me this almost psychological education, which is kind of so funny when you think about it. If you're also autistic, let me know if you feel the same way. But it's almost given me this thing where I can really easily understand why other people are psychologically the way that they are, because I've studied myself so much. I don't know. Okay, and lastly, number 10, the unmasking process. The unmasking process has made me ignore social convention and be more of myself. This, I think, is just so awesome. Obviously, the unmasking process is incredibly hard and arduous. I want to say arduous. Is that the correct word in this context? I'm not sure. It's a long process to be unmasking, and I'm still in that process, and I'm sure I will be in that process for a very long time. But what it has given me the opportunity to do is go through this whole journey of learning how to not care what other people think of me, learning how to get used to being perceived, learning how to get used to the fact that people are probably going to judge me, because I'm learning how to stim in public, be more of my autistic self, express more of my autistic joy. And I feel like it's kind of a shame that neurotypical people who are self-conscious, or neurotypical people who are really conscious of how they're perceived by other people, or neurotypical people who have difficulty being judged in any way, don't get the opportunity to go through this unmasking process, because as hard as it is, it's also given me a massive opportunity to learn how to not give as many fucks, basically. And obviously it's a process, but I'm also really proud of myself for getting stuck in and knowing that that's what I need to give myself to be able to be happier in society. I need to be masking less. So I'm really grateful for my autistic self in that way. And that is that. Thank you so much for joining me for these 10 wonderful things that I love about being autistic. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, because it really helps me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!